Here we are this morning, and every day that y'all start up one of these pieces of equipment, you need to be able to do the early morning checklist, which you got a tablet that you need to record it on, and we will show y'all that a little later. But for right now, the first thing you do in the morning, make sure your piece of equipment is on flat ground, everything is lowered down, so all the levels will be on the level site. And then at that time, you need to come back here and you need to check your engine oil. So let me show you how that's done one step at a time for everything. I'm going to show you the engine oil, the transmission oil, and the hydraulic oil, and make sure your fuel, so you'll know where your fuel's at. Okay, so let's begin. First thing you do is you come back here, you unlatch your right side, you unlatch your left side, and then you raise your hatch up. So once you get your hatch all the way up, if you're at the back of the machine on the sellick, it's going to be on the right hand side, down in the middle section of the machine. You can see it here. It'll actually have a yellow pull handle that you can pull out. So as you can see, I'm looking at it now, it's showing that it's overfilled, and then we're going to reinsert it and pull it back out on level ground to make sure it's showing. So here I go. I'm inserting the dipstick back in all the way until it's all the way in flush, and then I'm going to pull it back out. Now always hold your stick down, don't hold it back up. Don't hold your stick back up, because if you do, it's going to give you an improper level. But you can see the oil's real clean, so it's been previously serviced. You just insert it back in so it's safe to operate on the oil side. The next thing we're going to do is right beside it, you actually have your transmission dipstick. We're going to pull it out. It's long, so you pull it out. You will look at the levels that's actually on the stick itself. And as you can see here, it shows a level site. It's supposed to be leveled there. But when it's shut down, it could climb up halfway. Then as it starts up, the torque converter is going to pull it down. It's going to actuate the pump inside the transmission. Then it's going to pull it back down to the level site. You can check it simply by two ways. One, you can look at it here at the halfway mark, here. And that's going to show you with it not running. Then once you crank it up, it's going to pull it down to here. So we're going to insert it back in. There's a big round tube here sits right beside your old dick step on the sellick, so it'll guide you to it. So I'm going to pull it back out now, and let's see what it's showing. It's clear, so it's hard to see. So it's showing right here in the halfway mark. Between this point and this point be the halfway mark, and that's where it's at. So right now it'd say it was safe, but when we get a few minutes, we'll crank it back up and make sure that it pulls down to the full mark. Okay? So just wipe it back off and reinsert it. So that's being said that you've checked your transmission. But while you're here, here's a filter that I was talking about. You slide it out. This is the one that you need to blow. And then this is called the secondary filter. Your primary filter is the one that's on the inside. So you got two filters in it. You got one that's on the inside. Do not pull it out. Do not remove that filter. That filter only gets pulled out by the service provider. It comes in and pulls it out, because you don't need to blow that. That's actually protecting the engine. In the event your primary filter goes bad, the secondary filter will catch it. Okay? So remember, you got your primary and secondary filters. Here's the air filter out of the air filter housing on this S100 S80 sellick. But anyway, I'm going to show you right here is an air hose, air nozzle. It's got the safety features around the side, so it's not going to hurt you or nothing. You want to go straight into it, not the sideways, because you don't want to blow these things sideways. Now, as you see, it's getting clean, because there ain't no more trash or dust inside the filter. So we're blowing it out. He's going to reinsert it back in, so he's making sure everything's clear. You slide it all the way back in till the filter seals all the way back to the back. And that has a key spot on the bottom of it. You see how it locks it back in? And then he's able to pull his clips back. Then he can push it forward. And then he's able to lock one clip. Then he pushes the other clip over. And he latches that clip back in. And that's all you got to do to hold the filter back in place. But while you're here, you need to take a look at your connections on everything. Make sure everything looks right. You want to look down inside the engine block, make sure you don't see no engine oil leaks or nothing wrong. You want to take a look at your fan belt drive, which is right here. You can see your fan belt, making sure that it's good. It's got tension. You don't see no cracks or breaks on it. You want to look at all your hoses, make sure that you don't see no cracks or breaks on your hoses from here. Okay, now let's go on the other side and let's check the water levels. Okay, so as we're walking around to the, you might well say the driver's side, and you can actually see your antifreeze level here. With it not running, shut off and level, you should see it right there at the halfway mark. As you can see it right there. Okay, so it's perfectly fine. But while you're here again, look at the right side of your engine block. Look at your belt here and making sure you don't see no loose connections, no breaks, or no tears, or no oil spills. If you see that, or if you start before you start up in the morning, look under the machine and see if you see any bad oil spots. If you do, you need to go back and tell that to your manager in charge or your production chief that's in charge. So that way they'll know what to take a look for and ask for help if needed. Okay? So, by the way, while we're here, if you're running this machine and it happens to get hot for some reason or other, and you raise the hood and you see it's low in antifreeze, do not pull that cap right here off and try to insert antifreeze while it's cool, because once you pull this off, it's going to expel the steam heat that's built up, and it's going to spray out, and it can actually burn you, and you don't want that to happen. So make sure, let this thing cool down before you pull this cap. But every morning, make sure you get this topped off to this level before you start. Okay? That's where you need to be. And also, when you're here early in the morning, you got the back of your radiator here. Okay? You got an intercooler, and then you got your radiator. So what you want to make sure of every morning before you start, that it's good and clean and clear, just like you see right here. If you see matted dirt and dust on this thing, you need to take a blow nozzle that has no less than 30 psi, no greater than, and then you could come back here and you could go straight across, blowing straight across, over it, down, and back across. Do not turn it sideways, because you can actually bend these flumes here, and then if you bend all these flumes, it's going to act just like it's a plugged up radiator. Now let's go over here to the hydraulics. Make sure your carriage is all the way down and your mouse is tipped back as much as possible, and get it flat on flat ground. Where your level height is. What you want to do is wipe this off, and you want to look here. Right now it's showing very low. So the hydraulic oil should be right along 3/4 of a fill of a tank. That's in just about in every application. So it should be right along here. Okay, to let everyone know, what you need to do is make sure that you got a good clean funnel, because as I've always said, if you can't put it in your mouth and eat it, how do you expect this machine to be able to eat dirt and trash? So make sure it's good and clean before you insert the oil in. And by the way, what we're installing in this today is an AW 32 hydraulic oil. And then once you're through, make sure you put the cap back on it. And make sure when you store your hydraulic oils that you didn't use a full tank. Make sure you put them in a closed container. Do not leave them outside in the weather, because if these tops are pushed down, it's below this, it'll have a tendency of allowing water to work its way inside. So always put your containers up back inside of a storage area, and do not leave them outside in the yard. Put your top back on. Make sure it goes all the way back. It's back in position. Okay, let me explain something to you. While we was checking the motor oil, we didn't need to put no motor oil in it. So the engine oil that it actually takes, it's a Rotella 1540. And here's a picture of what it looks like. But if you're using a cat loader, you need to use all cat products. When you go to check out your machine in the morning, like we've been talking about the radiator, the engine oil, the hydraulic oil, and the antifreeze. The other thing you got to be aware of is make sure mechanically everything is working fine. So one thing that you got to do is make sure that you see all your wheel studs here are pulled up and they're tight. Okay, this one looks fine. You see no motion between the stud, the lug nut, and the wheel. So that's what you need to do to go around the total machine, making sure all your lug nuts are up and tight. If you need to, you could take a marker and mark across a stud and across a lug nut and across here. Then you would always be able to see if it's ever moved. That's a quick and easy way to keep up with it. The other thing that you need to do before you start in use, you need to look at your carriage. You need to look at your pins, make sure they're in properly. Look at the back of it, make sure the bolts are in properly, holding the cylinder in place. Look at your long bolts here on your frame. Your long bolts here on your frame, make sure you got no shifting and no motion in here. If all that looks good, you're in great shape. Okay? And then the other thing you need to do every morning is look at your chains. Okay, right now this machine is all the way down so the chains are loose. Okay? So what you need to do, you need to make sure you don't have no breaks in the lengths of the chain, that you can see them on both sides. Make sure you ain't got no pull out on the rails. Make sure that your bolts and your carter keys are in position here to make sure that your chains are not going to drop or fall off or anything. And then one of the other things you want to do is take a look at on the inside of your carriage to make sure that you can see that all your rollers are inside the carriage. Most of them take as many as 6 rollers. You'll have 2 on top and 1 at the bottom on some, and some will actually have 4. Okay, so really what you'd have to do is start the machine up and then raise it up slightly and tilt it forward, and you can see the sight of all your rollers. And by the way, one of the other things you need to do, once a week, you need to take a chain lubrication. It's made for a chain to where you can lubricate these chains, because you do not want to get grease on these chains. You don't want to put motor oil on these chains because it collects dust and dirt and it gets all over this chain, and it'll actually work its way between the pins, and before you know it, you got excessive wear where it actually pulls back and forth. Another thing that you need to do in the mornings is you need to make sure that your parking brake cable is setting. Anytime that you got to work beneath this thing to check it out, always make sure that you set the parking brake on level ground and scotch your wheels. So always make sure it's safe. At any given moment, you need to check something out underneath the machine. Block it. Okay? The other thing you need to check out in the morning is making sure that your horn works. Make sure that all your controls are working properly. And turn your lights on and make sure that all your lights are working. Okay? And the other thing you always want to make sure is when you start it up and you put it in reverse, you got a backup alarm that should be buzzing. You should hear it beep. So when it starts beeping, you got it in reverse, it's working fine. If you don't have a beep, you need to report that's not working. You need to report anything that's on that checklist that's not working properly so we can get maintenance attention to it. And also as well, most all the machines have about a 5 to 10 pound fire extinguisher on it. This one right here does. So that's a great thing to have just in the event you need it. You lower your hood down. You latch it, lower your hood down, you latch it. Once you do that, you turn your key back on. Turn your key to on position. Then you hit reverse, and you should hear that backup alarm going off. Which we do hear it. Okay, once that's checked out, you're good.